The air crackled with anticipation. The grand hall was filled with the elite, each one dressed to the nines, their eyes darting around, waiting for the moment that would define the evening. Not from excitement, mind you, but from pure, unadulterated ego. The kind of ego that fills a room and leaves no space for anything else. It was a gathering of the most self-important individuals, each one trying to outdo the other in a silent competition of grandeur. Chief Obafemi Adekunle was making an entrance. His presence was like a force of nature, commanding attention and respect, whether it was given willingly or not. His shoes, adorned with real ostrich feathers, announced his arrival before he even graced the doorway. Each step he took seemed to echo through the hall, a testament to his wealth and status. They were loud, obnoxious, and cost more than most people's entire wardrobe. The feathers swayed with each step, drawing eyes and whispers from every corner of the room.
I wouldn't have it any other way. The chief's voice was a low rumble, filled with satisfaction and a hint of arrogance.
The hall itself was a monument to excess. Every inch of it screamed opulence, from the marble floors to the gilded ceilings. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, each one probably representing a year's salary for a school teacher. The light refracted through the crystals, casting a dazzling display of colours across the room. Waiters in white gloves scurried around with trays of champagne and caviar, their faces carefully blank. They moved with practiced precision, ensuring that no glass was ever empty and no plate ever bare. No one dared to meet the chief's eye, not unless they wanted to be on the receiving end of his infamous glare. It was a look that could freeze even the most confident of individuals in their tracks.
Here he comes, all teeth and swagger. The words were whispered, but they carried through the room, a testament to the chief's larger-than-life presence.
He moved through the crowd like a shark. His eyes were sharp, missing nothing, and his smile was predatory, promising both charm and danger. His aides trailed behind him, clutching clipboards and sweating profusely. They were the unsung heroes of the evening, ensuring that everything went according to plan, even if it meant enduring the chief's wrath. One poor intern looked like he might faint. His face was pale, and his hands trembled as he tried to keep up with the chief's brisk pace. Chief Adekunle didn't even notice. To him, the intern was just another cog in the machine, easily replaceable and not worth his attention. He was too busy basking in the glow of his own self-importance. Every glance, every whisper, every nod of acknowledgement was a testament to his power and influence. After all, he was the chief. The title wasn't just a name, it was a declaration of his dominance, a reminder to everyone in the room of who held the real power. And everyone else, just background noise. They were there to fill the space, to provide a backdrop to his grandeur, to remind him of his place at the top of the social hierarchy. The ostrich feather shoes were more than just an accessory, they were a statement, a declaration of wealth, of status, of a life lived in the lap of luxury. Guests whispered and pointed, their expressions a mix of intrigue and envy. The shoes were a topic of conversation, a symbol of the chief's unassailable position in society. Chief Obafemi Adekunle smiled confidently, basking in the attention. He knew that tonight, like every other night, he was the star of the show. The opulent hall, filled with guests and luxury, was his stage, and he played his part to perfection, every step, every glance, every word a testament to his unrivaled status. One guest's envious face stood out, eyes fixed on the chief. It was a look of longing, of desire, of a wish to be in his shoes, both literally and figuratively. Chief Obafemi Adekunle raised a glass, making a toast. His voice rang out, commanding attention, as he spoke of success, of power, of the future. Guests raised their glasses, toasting with the chief. It was a moment of unity, of shared ambition, of a collective acknowledgement of the chief's place at the top. The ostrich feather shoes swayed with his movement, a final reminder of his opulence, his status, his unchallenged position in the world of the elite. And as the night wore on, the luxurious event faded into darkness, leaving behind only the memory of the chief's grand entrance and the echo of his feathered footsteps. Chief Adekunle believed in contracts. Sort of. He believed in signing them anyway, actually upholding them. Well, that was another matter entirely. He had perfected the art of the misunderstanding. A slight misplacement of a comma here, a conveniently forgotten clause there. It was all part of his charm.
The chief never said that.
His aides, bless their souls, were masters of the spin. They could twist words like pretzels, explaining away any discrepancies with the practiced ease of seasoned politicians.
You must have misunderstood.
Of course, everyone knew the truth. Contracts were just suggestions to Chief Adekunle, guidelines to be bent and broken at his whim. He was a man who operated on his own terms, consequences be damned, and for a long time he got away with it. After all, when you have enough money and power, who's going to stop you? Election season was Chief Adekunle's time to shine. It was a spectacle that the townsfolk had come to expect, a grand performance that played out every few years. He'd roll into town, his entourage in tow, and dazzle the people with his promises. The air would be thick with anticipation, as if the very atmosphere was charged with the electricity of hope. Piped water for every home, free education for all. These were not just promises, they were dreams painted in the brightest colours, visions of a future that seemed almost within reach, a chicken in every pot. The crowd would roar their approval, caught up in the moment. It was as if they could already taste the prosperity that was being promised to them. The applause would be deafening, a wave of sound that seemed to lift the chief higher on his pedestal. The people were entranced, their eyes shining with the light of newfound hope.
A brighter future, where poverty is a distant memory. It was a vision that resonated deeply with everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, and prosperity is just around the corner. The idea that their lives could change so dramatically, so quickly, was intoxicating.
He was a master storyteller, weaving tales of a brighter future. His speeches were like carefully crafted pieces of art, each word chosen to evoke the strongest emotions. His words dripped with honey, soothing and seductive. They wrapped around the listeners like a warm blanket, making them feel safe and hopeful. He knew exactly what buttons to push, what dreams to exploit. He was a maestro of manipulation, conducting an orchestra of emotions with the precision of a seasoned conductor. The problem was the promises were about as substantial as smoke. They looked solid from a distance, but up close they dissipated into nothingness.
Once the election was over, the piped water dried up, the schools remained underfunded, and the only chickens in sight were the ones running around people's yards. The grand promises turned out to be nothing more than illusions. The reality was stark and unforgiving. The infrastructure that was supposed to bring clean water to every home was left to rust, and the schools that were promised new books and better facilities continued to struggle with the bare minimum.
But by then, it was too late. The people had already cast their votes, swayed by the chief's silver tongue. The realization of their mistake came slowly, like a creeping shadow that eventually engulfed their hopes. The people had already cast their votes, swayed by the chief's silver tongue. They had been enchanted by the dreams he sold, only to wake up to the harsh reality that those dreams were just that, dreams. The cycle would continue as it always had, with promises made and broken, and the people left to pick up the pieces of their shattered hopes. Chief Adekunle had a deep appreciation for the finer things in life. Designer suits, luxury cars, mansions in every corner of the globe.
It's all about diversification, he'd say, swirling a glass of imported brandy. You have to protect your assets.
He amassed wealth with the same zeal that a squirrel hoards nuts, except instead of nuts, it was taxpayer money. And instead of burying it in the ground, he stashed it away in offshore accounts, safely tucked away from prying eyes. He'd talk about his investments with a wink and a nudge, as if he was some kind of financial genius. Protecting his assets, indeed. From the people he was supposed to be serving, that's for sure. The irony was lost on him, of course, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe he just didn't care. After all, when you're swimming in a sea of ill-gotten gains, who needs morals? Every now and then, Chief Adekunle would grace the local hospital with his presence. His arrival was always a spectacle, a carefully orchestrated event designed to project an image of benevolence and concern. The hospital staff would be notified in advance, ensuring that everything was in place for the grand show. A photo op, a chance to show the people that he cared. Cameras would flash, capturing moments of supposed empathy and generosity. The local media would be invited, their reports painting a picture of a man deeply invested in the well-being of his community. He'd shake hands, offer empty platitudes, and maybe even shed a crocodile tear or two. His words, though seemingly heartfelt, were hollow, devoid of any real commitment or intention to bring about change. The tears, if they came, were nothing more than a performance, a calculated move to enhance his public image.
It was all for show, of course. The grand gestures, the emotional displays, they were all part of a carefully crafted facade. Behind the scenes, the reality was starkly different. The hospital continued to struggle, its staff overworked and underpaid, its patients left to suffer in silence.
He'd walk past rows of patients, their faces etched with pain and worry without a second glance. The sight of their suffering did not move him. It was merely a backdrop to his performance. The patients, desperate for help, were nothing more than props in his elaborate charade. The dilapidated state of the hospital, the lack of basic supplies, the overworked staff, it all seemed to escape his notice. Or perhaps he chose to ignore it. The crumbling walls, the broken equipment, the exhausted faces of the medical staff. These were inconvenient truths that did not fit into his narrative of compassion and care. Or maybe he just didn't want to see it. Acknowledging the reality would mean admitting that his efforts were insufficient, that his grand gestures were nothing more than a band-aid on a gaping wound. It was easier to turn a blind eye, to maintain the illusion of compassion without having to confront the harsh truths. It was easier to maintain the illusion of compassion when you didn't acknowledge the suffering right in front of you. The lavish office, the luxurious surroundings, they provided a comfortable distance from the harsh realities of the hospital. In his world, empathy was a performance, a tool to be used for personal gain. His visits were brief, his interactions even briefer. A few words exchanged, a few hands shaken, and then he was gone. The hospital staff, left to pick up the pieces, knew better than to expect any real help. They had seen it all before: the empty promises, the fleeting visits, the lack of follow-through.
He had places to be, people to see, deals to make. His schedule was packed with meetings and appointments, each one more important than the last. The hospital, with its endless needs and demands, was a distraction, an inconvenience that he could not afford to dwell on.
After all, someone had to keep the wheels of corruption turning. The deals, the negotiations, the backroom agreements, they were the real work. The work that kept his empire running. The hospital visits were a sideshow, a necessary evil to maintain his public image. And that someone, unfortunately, was Chief Adekunle. In his opulent mansion surrounded by luxury, he could afford to ignore the suffering of others. His conscience, if it ever pricked him, was easily silenced by the comforts of his wealth and power. The hospital, with its endless needs and demands, was a world away, a distant problem that he could choose to ignore.